Good morning, everyone. It's great to see such a mix of students, staff, and faculty here in this auditorium very early on a Monday morning. I also want to say hello to people who are showing up here on Zoom. And I want to thank so much this incredible panel of experts who are giving of their time to talk with our community this morning. Thank you so much. I know that this has been quite a challenging time for all of us, including me, and for our community. And sometimes it seems like, as we come together in community, sometimes it seems like there might not be an end to these challenges. And I say that because I feel it sometimes too. And then when I show up to CC and I sit in a room and I see all of you here who have shown up to come together in community, it is this. It is the fact that we show up like this to gain comfort from each other, to be with each other, to share our feelings with each other, whether they are feelings of sadness, of anger, of hope, of inspiration, of compassion. Part of what gives me such a sense of hope and such a sense of optimism, frankly, no matter how I might be feeling when I wake up in the morning, is the fact that what I've learned about this community is how we come together for each other when we need to, when the chips are down. And by coming together for each other, I mean we are willing to have courageous conversations with each other. We are willing to listen to each other, to show compassion to each other, and to learn from each other. That's what I appreciate so much about this community, and it's why I appreciate all of you showing up this morning, both in person and on Zoom, to have this community conversation. And we're having this community conversation because we have heard from you. We have heard from you that this is what you want more of. So I just want to say thank you once again for being here. I want to thank everyone who came together to put together this community conversation. I see some of you up there too. And I want to thank all of you who are here taking of your time to be on this panel to share information with our community. I appreciate it so much. And now I'd like to introduce Ryan Simmons, who is our Vice President of People and Workplace Culture.
Thank you, Song. Song did just introduce me. I'm the Vice President of People and Workplace Culture. And that's a title that has a lot of weight to it because it feels to me like I'm trying to help facilitate a conversation with this whole campus around how do we thrive, how do we work together effectively, and how can we create the best possible experience for our students. And that's what we're going to be talking about today in this panel. I'll share in a moment here what the vision behind this is, but the general idea is that we have wisdom, experience, and truly deep expertise on our campus and in our community, and we want to access that as we learn together how we can thrive as an organization. A couple things I wanted to talk about just to set context. One is that we have had a very thoughtful conversation as a campus around what do we do to elevate wellness and mental health as one of our core commitments as an organization. And there are 4 things that we're going to be working on over the course of the next couple of years to be better and more effective together as a group. So those 4 areas are enhancing our external expertise and leveraging the wisdom outside of the campus, leveraging our new and existing resources more effectively. So we're already making lots of investments in one another. How do we make sure that we take advantage of those and make sure that they're personally relevant and impactful for each of us? Recognizing the stress of the block plan, what do we do to create an experience that enables us to thrive, to continue to challenge us and help us fulfill our commitment to being excellent, but at the same time actually feeling like we're investing in ourselves and more well-resourced than we were at the beginning of the experience. And lastly, making sure that our communications help us to tell this story and to connect to each other in a more effective way. Those are 4 commitments that we're making. The QR code that you'll see on here and the link that you see is a link to a page where we're actually documenting the progress we're making on tasks under each of those commitments. And there's a lot of work that's already been done and also work that we're beginning to do in each of these areas. So you can go out there and take a look at any time to see where we are in moving that work forward. 2 announcements that I want to make today. One is that we're in negotiations right now with Virtual Care Group to be able to provide real-time virtual telehealth for mental health for our students. This is going to be a really great program where people can get instant help on their phone, their laptop, in whatever way is going to be helpful to them, real time. So very excited to be able to make that announcement. We'll share more details as that is finalized. The other thing we want to let you all know about is in our drive to make sure that we can help create a safer campus for all of us, we are going to be offering QPR training for all members of the community. This will be virtual training for anybody who wants to learn about how to help contribute to suicide prevention and some of the ways that we can do that together. We're going to be requiring that for all staff and faculty with the intention of saying that it's our shared commitment to develop these skills so that we can be, a community can help keep each other safe. And we'll be sharing some more details about that later. But the idea for you as a student to know about is you can participate in that if you'd like so that you can learn those skills. But you should know that everybody on this campus who you're working with in terms of staff and faculty will have those skills to be able to provide you with some extra support if you're having some challenges. Today is an opportunity for us to have a conversation as a community, to have a shared conversation about what's going on and how we can work together. But there are existing programs that are already scheduled that you might want to take advantage of as we roll towards winter break, that you might want to take advantage of to help with your mental health and your wellness. So a couple of these are up here. I mentioned QPR training, so we'll be rolling out virtual training, but you can also take it in person, so you can practice some of the skills, get real-time feedback, etc. So those classes are out there. There's also classes on helping to reduce stress and to have good strategies for self-care as we're going forward. So you can see over the next couple of weeks, there's actually quite a bit of programming intended to help provide you with some of these skills and support if that's something that you think would be helpful. All of that information is available on this website, and again, there's a QR code here if that's going to be helpful for you to find it, but we really want you to take advantage of these courses so that you can make sure that you can have the skills that will be helpful. So with that context, I want to get to my part where I'm really excited about. Over the last couple of weeks, as we've been talking as a panel about doing this work together, I've been so inspired by the wisdom, the commitment, and the passion of the folks that you see here on this stage. So I'm very excited to introduce this panel to you today, where we can talk about what we can do together to create a thriving and compassionate community. So I'm going to be reading my notes as we go so that I make sure I don't say anything incorrect, so apologize if I do slip up here a little bit. But I wanted to start with Kaylee Crivello. So Kaylee has been a residential life counselor at Mathias Hall since 2020, and she is a staff council representative. Kaylee has a Master's of Science in Counseling with an emphasis in student development in higher education, where her thesis was Management of Secondary Trauma Experiences for Resident Assistance and Housing and Residential Life. I think you can see how that's a little bit relevant to what we're talking about today. And she was awarded the Bob Peasy Outstanding Advisor of the Year Memorial Award in 2021. Can we go ahead and do a round of applause for Kaylee? I'd also like to introduce Derrell Stinson. Derrell has been with Colorado College about as long as me, so about 3 months, and he's already been doing amazing work. So he is our Community Standards and Care Manager, and his focus is on resource connections, conduct, and student success. He has worked at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, Brigham Young University, and served in the United States Army prior to working at Colorado College. Please welcome Derrell. Dr. Alisa Hannum is a clinical psychologist at the Counseling Center and focuses on providing evidence-based psychotherapy for anxiety, PTSD, other trauma reactions, depression, sleep issues, and difficulties with emotional regulation. She has over 10 years of experience in providing evidence-based psychotherapy and specialized training in treating PTSD and the effects of trauma. Adriana Trujillo is our Assistant Director of Campus Safety. She is a proud Colorado Springs native, and she began working at Colorado College in December of 2019 after 20 years at UCCS. She is trained and certified with the FEMA Incident Command System, and she earned her master's degree in communications from UCCS. Please welcome Adriana. Doré is our senior chemistry major and an education minor who works for Butler Center and is our student body president. She is also on the rugby team, which is one of the teams that was impacted by some of the losses that we've experienced recently, and so she's bringing that context to our conversation today. She has been working together with us for over a year on this issue. Please welcome Doré Young. Rich Bennett is a veteran of nearly 20 years in NCAA Division I athletic training, joined the athletics department here at Colorado College as an Associate Athletic Director for Sports Management and Wellness in 2020. He has a Master's of Science in Education with an emphasis in Sports Management and Administration. Rich. Dr. Ann Rush is a co-founder of Status Code 4, which is a local nonprofit that provides mental health services to Colorado first responders and their family members. Her doctorate is in education with a specialization in training and performance. She's a retired United States Air Force officer and has spent over 30 years performing duties as an adult educator, operator, and program manager. Please welcome Dr. Rush. And finally, I'd like to announce our moderator. It's Dr. Heather Horton. Dr. Horton is a clinical psychologist and has 20 years of experience in providing mental health services working with survivors of interpersonal violence. As the Senior Director of Student Health and Wellbeing, Heather focuses on developing and implementing prevention programs focused on preventing violence, promoting mental health, and creating a healthy, caring, and compassionate campus community. Please welcome Dr. Horton.
Thank you, Ryan. It's exciting to be here with all of y'all and really excited to hear from our panelists today. I think as Ryan had indicated, we have a few areas that we really want to dig into today with you all, including thinking about how we can enhance our physical and psychological safety, how we can heal from experiences that we have had, and what we can do to create a more compassionate community together. And so we have limited time with these lovely folks, so I'm going to go ahead and jump in with some questions. As you all are aware, with the rise of hate speech and recent mass shootings across our country and in the Colorado Springs community, many folks in our community are concerned about their safety. And so I was hoping, Adriana, that you could start us off in speaking about the ways in which the college approaches these concerns and the kinds of resources available, and then we might have other folks on the panel chime in as well.
My name's Adriana. I think approaching it is responding with care for a safe campus community, having a sense of belonging and some responsibility also to safeguard our campus. And of course, providing educational services and programs. As we recognize our college's location within an urban city, it's important for us to also accept the realities that exist with our city's size. So we need to be aware of our surroundings. We need to be self-empowered to engage within our community, be willing to model safe behavior, and also being willing to encourage others to do the same. We also follow and utilize the Department of Homeland Security's campaign of See Something, Say Something. So anything that is suspicious, bringing that public awareness to us and specifically to campus safety by seeing any kind of activities, behaviors, or circumstances that may be uncomfortable, not necessarily deemed as suspicious, but anything that you are concerned for. Some specific resources that we provide here on campus are RAVE, which is our emergency notifications for any emergencies. That's supplemented with our RAVE Guardian app that you can also download from the App Store. This is a really great tool because it can share your location when you call to campus safety. You can access crisis resource numbers right there, all listed on the tab. And then you can actually do live text, so that real time that Ryan was talking about, you can also have with our campus safety dispatch. You can also set safety timers. So if you're out and about across campus, regardless of the time, or even to downtown, you can set those timers, and it also shares your location with campus safety so someone knows where you're at. Our standard response protocol is also our emergency notification system, and that provides clear messaging and instructions on what to do during an emergency. We also, of course, provide the programs for your living and work spaces, which include our safety liaison program, our fire safety, our crime prevention through environmental design. So lots of other resources that we have. If you're not familiar with campus safety, our numbers blasted everywhere across campus, our non-emergency and our emergency number. So I hope that if you haven't already, please seek those out. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Great, thank you so much. And I really appreciate, Andriana, that you talked about what we get to do as a community, and that see something, say something. So I want to give a shout out to my colleagues from the Wellness Resource Center who could raise their hands and wave, who will be doing the badass training next week, which is be aware, decide to act, say something. So really developing those skills of understanding awareness, how to respond, a great place to sort of build your own skills and comfort in that area. Kaylee, would you be willing to address some of the things that the residential experience works on in terms of safety?
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, everybody. I first want to echo and just say thanks to President Richardson and to Ryan and to Heather for sharing all the things that you have already, and shared my deepest apologies and condolences for anyone or most of the people in this room that have lost or are grieving someone based on the recent tragedies that we've all been enduring. So I want to first start off by just acknowledging that. I think this conversation is so important, but feels really heavy to have already. And I think that one of the things that I thought about when this question was asked was related to a really wonderful conversation that Student Life had with CCSGA, I think in the beginning of Block 2. And in that conversation, we talked a lot about how we can improve psychological and physical safety on campus through after-hours resources and support. And we learned a lot from that conversation. We talked about what kinds of resources students do call if they are calling after hours. We learned a lot about how students are most likely calling friends or roommates or other support systems, and how we can improve that sort of connection between when a student calls someone for support and then how we can access those, or how we can provide those resources for them and provide better avenues for access. So I know residential experience and Student Life are doing a lot of things to hopefully improve those connections. I know we've spoke a lot already about the trainings that we're kind of improving or doing refreshers on, including QPR, mental health first aid, really important trainings for intervention and referral response. We're also doing a lot to offer programs during times and spaces that make more sense for our students. So more after hours, programs that are in residential spaces or on crosswalks, or providing different avenues for intervention and support. And then we're also providing more visibility for staff and for faculty, like having these kinds of conversations, and having the ability for folks that are in positions that interact so closely with students to have that visibility. And I think we're also trying to provide safer and more authentic spaces for students to grieve and to honor some of our losses. So I know, for example, there was a really beautiful space that was put on by the Butler Center and by Student Life on Thursday to honor the tragedy of the Club Q shooting, and that space being a really authentic and wonderful way to heal based on each person's needs. So I think there's been a variety of things that we've been addressing and that we want to do as far as creating more psychological and physical safety, but those are some of the things I think I can think of to start. So
Awesome, thank you. I wanted to make sure that we addressed some of the concerns that were raised in the student concerns that were raised and demands, the letter of demands, were around how the classroom experience impacts students' well-being. And Dr. Emily Chan, who is our Dean of the Faculty, in my work with her, and she's given kind permission today for me to share a few things that the faculty are already doing to improve things for students, which include new, more specific absence guidelines for mental health, and that there will be going forward on all campus class syllabi, a statement about mental health and the resources available to students. Anonymous reporting tool for students to be able to share concerns that they have about classroom experiences through the course evaluation process, which is 100% anonymous. And there will be more information coming out about all of these resources. And then the faculty have really been engaging through faculty meetings and chair meetings and department meetings in terms of really setting norms. And the faculty developed a fantastic guide for faculty to think about. And they've been setting up a number of different strategies and practices and talking with one another about best practices to think about time, scheduling, amount of work, learning objectives, and other instructional practices to make sure that students really do have time off from class. And so you'll be learning more about those kinds of things in the days and weeks to come. As we elevate our focus on mental health on campus, we're also working to better engage all members of our campus community in understanding the signs and symptoms of mental health challenges and crises and responding to those who are struggling. So Ryan and Kaylee referenced the QPR kinds of training, and I mentioned badass training. And Dr. Rush, I was hoping to start with you. If you could speak to additional opportunities for learning in the Colorado Springs community that folks might want to look for.
Sure, and thank you again for allowing me to be on this panel here. It's such an honor to be a part of this and such an important topic to discuss. Just so you're aware, El Paso County is like number 5 in the nation for suicides. So this community as a whole feels the impacts of trauma and of grieving and losing the loss of someone who takes their life, unfortunately. So there are a lot of training opportunities that have come up in the last couple of years that have been available to the community. First and foremost, there's mental health first aid classes. Diversus Health tends to offer a lot of them. There's an organization called Pikes Peak Suicide Prevention Organization. They're right down the street off of Tejon. And they offer group grieving sessions. They also offer a lot of education. And then they also offer free counseling for those individuals who are contemplating suicide too. There is a class called ASSIST, which is Advanced Suicide Intervention Skills Training. It's a 2-day class, but to me, it is the best class to learn how to navigate the challenge that an individual is having with having suicidal ideations and those kind of things. And if you're on that other side listening to them, what are the tools and techniques that you can use to help them think of or establishing hope in their life? Because when you're talking about an individual who's contemplating suicide, they have no hope. And suicide seems like the only viable option. So it's a wonderful class, and we have those available. They're always sponsored, and I can certainly send you the calendar for any classes that we offer with that. There is also NAMI, which is the National Alliance of Mental Illness there. They've got a wonderful chapter here in Colorado Springs. There's family classes, there's peer-to-peer groups that happen. There's also an anxiety and depression group too. So there are a lot of organizations that are already doing great work out in the community. So if you are staff, faculty, or students, and you may just feel uncomfortable dealing with folks that may know you because the stigma is very real, there absolutely is organizations out in the community. There's also Inside Out youth organization as well. So that there's wonderful resources that I can share a directory with you for those numbers there that you can take advantage of. There are 2 conferences coming up in January. One that is here in El Paso County at UCCS. It's on suicide. I believe it's January 13th. And the other one is up in Teller County. And they're excited to get that launched with the Teller County Mental Health Alliance. And that is on January 16th. It's an all-day class or all-day sessions for dealing with suicide.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And since you mentioned the wonderful Colorado Springs NAMI chapter, I want to give a shout out to our student NAMI on Campus chapter, which is students here on campus who work with NAMI Colorado Springs as well. And Dr. Rush and Dr. Hannum, would y'all be willing to share sort of the top signs and symptoms that y'all might want for folks in our community to be aware of as we sort of engage with one another over the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, so when we think about mental health crisis in particular, I think it's important to think about signs within ourselves and then signs in the people around us, both things. One important thing to note is that mental health crisis is different than standard mental health challenge. So when we're in crisis, usually that's a short-term event. It's very intense, and there's this overwhelming urge to take some action. Often the urge for action is to do something that may actually make the crisis worse or make us more unsafe. In terms of looking at people around us, we might see a lot of distress in someone in crisis. We might also see the opposite, so withdrawal, isolation, concerns about statements someone is making. When we think about suicide prevention in particular, we think of kind of 3 things. So statements about not feeling like you belong, statements about feeling like you're a burden on the people around you, statements that sound hopeless. Those are the kinds of things we would look for. I think another piece that's important to keep in mind is often when we're in crisis, our executive functioning skills are not at their best. So one of the things we really need to be careful of is it's not always the best time to be trying to solve problems. Really, the goal in a crisis is really just to weather that crisis, because it is short term, it will pass, trying to get through it in a way that doesn't make things worse.
Yeah, and one thing, it's funny that you bring that up, because actually if you're sitting across someone and you're wondering, are they doing okay, give them a simple math problem to solve. It might sound odd, especially if, like, say, figure out the tip amount, because when we are traumatized or experiencing a lot of crisis, our cognitive abilities shut down and we're not able to work through simple things like that. And that's a key indicator there. The other sign to look for is if you yourself notice that you're not doing the things that you usually enjoy. That is a big flag there that something's probably going on. It may be that a lot of things are happening in your life, but if you always like to read and the thought of picking up a book just kind of makes you sick to your stomach, something's usually going on there. And the same thing out with those that are close to you. If you notice that they're just not laughing anymore, they're not enjoying the things that they like, they don't like to go to the movies anymore, they don't like to go fishing or whatever, those are usually flags that it's time for you to check in with them and see how they're doing.
Can I just add to that really quick?
Of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Hello? Me? Oh, there we go. Yeah, and then CCSGA's meeting with the Student Life Division, that's one thing that we were really looking at, is that, and that's something that I kind of addressed from a personal perspective and an anecdotal perspective of when someone is going through crisis, their cognitive abilities are not working, their executive function is not working. And so that's why it's really hard when the campus has such amazing resources that Andriana and Kaylee just shared about, is sometimes it's not enough to have the resources. You also need to be in a headspace to be able to access them and seek that out and take the initiative and this and that. And when we were talking about after hours support, it's oh, I'm going through crisis, maybe I'll think to call the counselor on call or the RA on call or this or that. But like Kaylee said, I'm probably gonna just reach out to a friend or reach out to a parent or something, or maybe not reach out to anyone. And so we really are thinking about those problems as an institution and trying to do our best to meet students where they are. And that's a really important part of the conversation to address is it's not enough to just like have the resources. We also need to like trust the resources and know the resources and want to go to the resources, but also yeah, like either for ourselves or for other people around us, like be able to take us to those resources, just because it can be really difficult in times of crisis.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Derrell. And I think in the interest of time, and also I want to really go off of what you're talking about as we think about the fact that folks do reach out to their friends, their family, most often when they're in times of struggle. We were thinking that it might be important for us as we try to create a compassionate community of healing to develop a shared understanding of the language about this topic so that we can maybe better help connect our friends and family and colleagues to resources or to just be useful to them in framing those experiences. And Dr. Hannum, could you share with us the kinds of things that facilitate healing for folks?
Yeah, so especially when we're talking about trauma, I think some things are important to keep in mind. One is that, first of all, that trauma is very common, unfortunately. So when we look at the data, the population level data in the US, it's about 90% of the population has experienced some kind of traumatic event, way too many, right? And often we assume that that traumatic event is going to cause certain outcomes, but that assumption seems to be pretty faulty. So when we look at people right after a trauma, many people do have similar effects. So often that looks like thinking about the memory when you don't want to, having nightmares, intense distress, being very hyper aroused, being very upset. But what we find is that very soon after a trauma, for many, many people, for most people, within a week, within a month, those symptoms start to change over time. So when we talk about intervention, we need to be very careful that we're not assuming everything is a one-size-fits-all intervention. For many people, intervention in that first month might look like a lower level of care. So the big things there might be just depending on friends and family for support, outreaching support groups, journaling, meditating. But the big thing is helping each other process trauma. So Dr. Rush and I were just speaking about some of the things that we can see getting in the way of processing trauma. And one of the big things is being afraid of distress. Distress is really normal after a trauma. We need to be better about holding space for that for each other. And sometimes we get messages from those around us that we need to get better faster, that we shouldn't be so upset, that we shouldn't be crying so much, things like that. Those are the things that get in the way of processing. So for most people, it might be those kind of lower levels. When we see someone continuing to struggle a month after trauma, that's kind of a landmark time in diagnostic, we do start to think about the need for additional intervention. Often when we're looking at what is it that's continuing to cause problems over time, the thing that trauma researchers and trauma therapists focus on is avoidance. So again, not giving yourself that opportunity to process, or not giving the people around you that opportunity to process, is often the problem. So when we think about formal intervention for trauma, all those interventions focus on helping people get in contact with their emotions, holding space for that, and being able to work with the narrative of the trauma. The good news is that we are actually very good at treating PTSD and the effects of trauma. So something like 80% of people that go through formal PTSD treatment get significantly better. And I want to be really clear, those treatments are available to everyone on this campus. And if you need help accessing those, please do contact me.
Dr. Rush,
Yes.
did you want to share some additional information?
Sure, I think that's all great information there. The other thing too is oftentimes when we're sitting across someone and we see them starting to break down and starting to cry, let them cry. There's concentrated cortisol that's been releasing, if you're talking about the physiological side, which is our body's own coping mechanism with getting through that. But it's a very important stage in that process to allow individuals to just let go. And always remember that not everyone reacts to a traumatic event the same way. So if you're like on pins and needles and getting all stressed out, and somebody seems like they're kind of just calm and going with the flow, that may just be how it is, but that is not a failure on any part. It's not saying that you're somehow deficient because you're more traumatized by an event than others. It just means that it was more relevant to you. Something that you saw affected you in a very deep and profound way, and it didn't in the other person, and that's absolutely okay. I think that when we deal with trauma and crisis, that understanding and normalizing our feelings is very critical, because if you start saying, hey, my feelings are not going the way that I think they should, something's wrong with me, and it becomes my identity, you set yourself up for even more harm and more injury of your psyche.
And I think one of the things that we often talk about when we talk about trauma and trying to create environments that are conducive to healing is recognizing that our own level of resiliency at the moment that we experience that event has a big impact on how we experience it and whether we experience it as traumatic or perhaps not, if we're in a really resilient moment in our lives. And so really important to think about that. And Rich, I don't know if you would like to maybe speak to the resiliency project that athletics is working on with children.
Yeah, I think first, just appreciate being here with this wonderful group of people and get to address you. Obviously, I work in athletics. I think, right, first, why am I a part of it? I think first, about 20% of our CC student body or varsity athletes, when you get into the club sports, I think it's over 50%. And I think 94% of our student body uses Alpamar. Right, when we talk about health and wellness, right, physical activity and being part of a team and a group. And so, right, I think my area, obviously, we see a lot of you and hope to be a healthy group. Next, I think my position, I came here in 2020. My predecessor was a head athletic trainer, so predominantly a medical position. I moved into a fancy title called Associate Athletic Director for Sport, Performance, and Wellness. And I love having wellness in my title. I think the goal has always been, since I've arrived, is to improve both our mental health, our nutrition, our sleep, along with, right, being a therapist and helping with athletic injury. And so just the importance of mental health and just overall wellness in what we do in athletics, both varsity, club. We have an athletic trainer, Christina Loretta, who's great with club sport, and our work with Chris Starr and just promoting wellness, whether it's yoga classes, being a part of a team, or a club, or things like that. What we've started is a relationship with Children's Hospital about 8 weeks ago. Very fortunate to start with them. And what we're doing is we're trying to be proactive in our approach towards mental health by providing some evidence-based scientific surveys. So there's 6 surveys that went out to our student athletes in the last week or so. We're hoping to collect that data. The surveys are based on both resiliency, wellness, anxiety, depression. They're measurement tools that have been used across both elementary, middle, and high schools here in the state of Colorado. And we're trying to gather information and to try to figure out, with the help of Children's Hospital and their experts, of how to provide more training, more mental health work. And very excited for that. And so we're collecting that data now. I hope probably in early January to sit down with their experts and again, provide some proactive approach to mental health in athletics. And again, we're a pilot program that I hope will outreach out to just the regular student body of our CC students. So really excited about that. I think it's a great opportunity for us, sort of game-changing, groundbreaking to be proactive in the community. I think in the past, we've been worried about putting out fires. I think here we're trying to be proactive in our approach to mental health and well-being, and just excited for that project to take effect.
Thank you. Dr. Hannum, can you talk with us a little bit about some of the trauma-informed practices that communities can implement to help individuals move toward healing from trauma?
Yeah, so there are actually very, very good resources for this on a national level. So SAMHSA has toolkits designed to help institutions become more trauma informed. And these are evidence-based toolkits. They're things that are being used in universities and colleges across the country and in other institutional settings. When we think about what is involved in those practices, first and foremost, it's creating safety and trust within the setting, within the institution. It's being able to recognize and honor what trauma can do for individuals and the effects of trauma. It's being able to empower individuals, offer choice, autonomy, also recognizing the effects of things like culture, race, ethnicity, gender, and the effects of those. And I think that one of the most important pieces is providing hope. And there's a lot of reasons to be hopeful about trauma care. I want to just say that again. I really do, in all my years of providing trauma-informed psychotherapy, what I'm most amazed by is how the human mind and spirit can grow and heal after trauma.
Derrell, would you speak for a bit and help folks understand the care team and the process for connecting folks to the care team so that we as individuals can kind of help make those connections?
Absolutely. So the care team is made up of higher level resources on campus, from accessibility, athletics, the Wellness Resource Center, the Counseling Center, the Butler Center, and the registrar. And we all come, and campus safety, excuse me. We all come together and look at student support through our separate lenses to see how we can support a student, but to also get a better picture of what support that student might need. Whether it's a housing dispute, if there's something that's going on in the classroom, maybe there's something going on at home. How is that impacting the student's ability to thrive at Colorado College? And then what type of process or course of action could we put together to help the student be successful, both inside and outside of the classroom? For all community members, whether you're a student, faculty member, staff member, or a family member, we all have access to the care team report, which you can find through the website. And if anyone does not know how to access that, please feel free to send me an email and I'll show you how to do it. But you can fill out a form. It asks about the relationship that you have to the person who needs some support. And then we're looking for the activities, the behaviors, and the circumstances that person is experiencing or going through, which helps inform our level of intervention with the student. And while it can be difficult to have back and forth with those who submit these reports, all of the reports are reviewed. All of the students that a report is submitted for, those students are contacted. And then the care team has a conversation about what we can do to support them. And the other important piece of what the care team does for the community and our ability to really be able to support students on campus is we work through how to support a student, but also identify gaps in our ability to communicate with other departments or our ability to communicate together as staff and faculty members in support of students, and then try to work with organizations to see how we can fill those gaps.
Thank you. And transparency about processes like that is an incredibly important part of being a trauma-informed community. Transparency is one of the really key factors as we think about creating trauma-informed environments. So really appreciate all of y'all being here and talking about the work that you do, and a process like the care report and team for people to really understand that, so we can maybe build or rebuild trust in those kinds of resources on campus. Dr. Hannum, as we think about making referrals for folks, so the care team sometimes is making referrals, sometimes we as individuals are making referrals, and sometimes especially referrals to things like mental health counseling or psychotherapy. Sometimes folks enter into those moments, enter those services with a lack of clear understanding about those processes. And sometimes that means that people will be like, I don't want to do that thing. I'm not interested in that. So I was hoping that you might be able to share some information about what you might like folks to understand about mental health treatment and resources in general.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I think about mental health recovery, I think one of the very hard pieces of this is not something that I or anyone else can do for someone else. So each of us is responsible for our own mental health recovery. And I don't, sometimes therapists will call themselves healers, and I don't really like that term because I don't see myself as a healer at all. The analogy I sometimes use is it's kind of like if you broke a bone and you went to see an orthopedist. That orthopedist would do things to try to help you. They would clean the wound, they would set the bone, they would do the surgery, they might send you to physical therapy afterwards, all those things. They're creating an environment for healing, but your body is still doing the healing. They're not healing that bone, your body is healing that bone, and you are participating in that by choosing to follow the recommendations, by going to the physical therapist, all those pieces. And mental health recovery is very much the same way. So I am responsible for my own mental health recovery, and each of us has to say the same thing. And I think about what therapy is, I really think about setting up an environment for healing, trying to create space, create a container to hold all of these really hard things. But the hard work has to be something each of us does on our own. One of my favorite therapies is called dialectical behavior therapy. And one of the sayings, the assumptions in that therapy is a really hard one to sit with sometimes. And that's about, often we haven't created our own messes, right? We kind of get handed those messes by different things in life, whether it's trauma, parenting, whatever it is. At the same time, we're the only one who can clean up our own mess. And that's a really tough piece about mental health recovery and about working with, especially with therapy and psychotherapy, but even with medication as well.
I really appreciate that because it also connects to one of the things that communities can do and individuals can do to help folks heal, which is provide opportunities for choice and a sense of regaining control, that when life hands us a lot of messes, we often feel out of control of things. And so finding ways to reconnect with that control. And are there other folks who might want to speak to the things that you think would be important for folks to know about resources or mental health treatment?
I did want to add for the care team reports, whenever we make contact with a student who someone had concerns about, we don't typically disclose who had those concerns about the student, because unless that's necessary for some reason. But we do appreciate having that information, because when we understand a relationship that a person has to a student, it really does inform our intervention. For instance, if a student is doing a care team report about their roommate that they haven't seen in 2 days, that's a lot different than a parent saying, my son has not called me for 2 days at college, right? And so that's very different. The same is true for, if a professor says, I have not had any contact with this student for 3 days and they also missed a meeting, that's gonna elevate our level of intervention, as opposed to a student didn't come to class for 1 day and I'm just concerned about them because I haven't heard from them. But when we make contact with those students, we'll typically let them know that somebody in the community cares about you, which is why we're having this conversation, and we just want to make sure that you're connected to the appropriate resources so that you can thrive while you're at Colorado College.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add, just from talking with a lot of CC student athletes and just students in general, because I have just a ton of interface, just how much our students rely on other students for mental health support. And so I think proper training and education for all of our CC students on how to provide that care, and then obviously creating boundaries, right, of just, right, when it's beyond the point of where, right, a fellow CC student can help and support someone in crisis. And so through my discussions with CC students, just how much I know that you all are leaning on each other, and that's a tough spot to put people in, and especially in crisis, that to seek help and to create boundaries to have a healthy experience with your friends. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And want to remind us again about the kind of training opportunities that are available both here on campus and in the community. And I'll give a shout out to the trauma-informed care kinds of trainings that folks in the Wellness Resource Center do, also through Excel at CC, and those might be opportunities that folks would like to engage with to learn a little bit more about in those areas. And also thinking about the continuum of care that is available for folks on campus, that as a licensed psychologist, I like talk therapy. I think it works well, but I also recognize that's not the right thing for every person, and it's not the right thing for every person wherever they are on that continuum of well-being, and that there are a lot of other resources and places where folks can plug in for support in offices, not just in the counseling center and the Wellness Resource Center, the chaplain's office, the residential experience, accessibility resources, lots of places that folks can go for those kinds of supports. And I'm mindful of time, so I'm going to move us along to sort of our final category of conversation today, which is really thinking about how we build a caring, healthy, compassionate community here at Colorado College. And one of the things that we've been hearing from many of our students is that they are feeling isolated, not feeling as connected to meaningful communities where they can be authentically themselves. They're lacking that sense of belonging. And Kaylee and Doré, I would love to start with y'all and ask you to speak to the work that the Residential Experience Team and CCSGA do to build community and connection.
Yeah, so CCSGA does a bunch of different things, and we look out for student mental health, but that looks like also a lot of different things. And essentially our job is just to identify student concerns and address them. So those are concerns that we have as student leaders, also that we're hearing, also that we know that are happening. And that can happen through advocacy, action, funding, any method. We work with administration to reform campus resources and have that communication going, give them feedback on their communications, work as best as possible together and advocate for students in that, spread awareness about off-campus resources, on-campus resources, just like have good communications with students. We talk a lot about holistic care of students and like unique struggles that marginalized students face. So an average meeting, we would be talking about topics like food, transportation, mental health resources, just every kind of aspect of like student life, and also like our internal proceedings, like those are on the forefront of what we're talking about. But unfortunately, there's limits to what we can do legally and institutionally. I think that's like one of the hardest things about it is like, right, there's not a shortage of funding or of money that we have, but there are like legal rules about how we can use that money. And so that's the reason that our mental health off-campus resource fund has kind of come to a standstill, which is unfortunate. But the people in CCSGA are also students and friends and tutors and RAs, and the group just includes really phenomenal student leaders who want the best for CC, and we also work to build meaningful communities in every area of campus personally, and that's something that is expected of us and that we have conversations about. But hopefully, yeah, we can set good examples in our community and care for each other well.
Yeah, I agree. Really, really good response. Well said. I also want to start by saying, when thinking about this question and thinking about how I wanted to answer this question, the first thing that comes to mind now kind of in this moment is, yes, we are doing so much, but we can always, as staff and faculty, and in part students, be doing more, which is why we're here, which is why we're here having this conversation, is to think about how we can do more and do better. A lot of my thought process around this question, also, I wanted to give a really quick shout out to all of the RAs. I see some in this room, and those that are watching virtually. I think so much of our student-to-student support comes from our RAs providing that intervention, sense of belonging, sense of place, sense of home, and we know that that happens a lot in our residential spaces. Additionally, a lot of my thought around this conversation tied back into our last question around healing as well, because I think in order for us to understand how to build a better community, we have to know what we're missing, or we have to know what we're looking for. And I think when thinking about that, two things that come to mind for me are being willing to have uncomfortable conversations, and also diving into our individual and collective responsibilities to have this knowledge, to have a baseline understanding for intervention and referral and support, whether that be on the student, staff, or faculty level. I think a lot about uncomfortable conversations in my day-to-day. I think so much of what Derrell had said was around how our after hours and on-call support, my supervisor said this so well the other day, like activates that intervention response. So a lot of times, I don't know if any of you in this audience or that are watching have had an RLC or an RA come to your door, or be asked to come down to an office in residential life and have this really uncomfortable conversation with a stranger about how you're doing. But that is our kind of baseline starting point to activate these resources and to activate the kind of next steps. And I think that that is really, really important when we're thinking about building a compassionate community or thinking about building a sense of belonging, is making every student and every staff and every faculty member feel like they matter. And that comes with going above and beyond to ask the questions, to have the uncomfortable conversations, and to follow up, and not to just let it kind of stop there. I think additionally, we've talked about a lot of the things that we're doing to learn from each other. I know that there are so many surveys that are happening across campus, both on the staff and on the faculty level, as well as our countywide and statewide and national surveys that are taking place. I think the more that we learn, the more that we will know, and if we know more, we can fill gaps in a better way.
And Kaylee, thank you for that, because it reminds me of the conversation that we all had last week around this idea that for many of you, this may come to you as a sense of, we're asking you to do more. And in many respects, we're not. And in some respects we are. And really thinking about, Rich's comments earlier about building appropriate boundaries for ourselves. And part of this work really relies on us doing our own work and knowing where our own boundaries are, where our skills that we can develop, and where are the things that we really know we already do well, and how can we continue to do that. And so maybe in the brief time that we have left, I would love to ask y'all kind of maybe a twofold question, and that is, what might be some of the scaffolding, the supports that we could build for ourselves as we do this work, and what maybe is something that you would love to see the folks around you do to create a sustained and compassionate, healthy community. And so it'll be a round robin, very quick answer, because I want to make sure we have, if folks would like to ask questions, there are microphones. And so as the panel answers these questions, if folks want to come to the mics, we'll try to get to those questions as well. But Dr. Hannum, can we start with you real quick?
Yeah, so I think when we're suffering, it's perfectly natural to turn inward and to become more self-centered. I think that's part of suffering. And ironically, I think sometimes the fix isn't so much seeking out more support for depression and loneliness and things like that. It's more about turning outward and offering more support to the people around us. So I would love to see, I meet with a lot of students, a lot of people feel really lonely. I would love to see more people outreaching to people that they notice out in the community that are not as connected.
We do get an endorphin bump when we behave in a compassionate and caring way to other people. Yeah. Dr. Rush?
I think that on that same vein, allowing yourself to be okay with not feeling okay and then seeking out the appropriate help. Because it's sometimes it's easier for us to help others, but when it comes to us, we're like, ugh, you know, they've got it worse. I don't really have it that bad, or maybe I'm just deficient and I don't need to. So just being humble enough to recognize that you're worth it and that you can only provide the degree of support that you're able to give. And so the healthier that you can get yourself, the more that you're going to be able to help the community.
Beautiful. Derrell?
For the individual, I would say two things: feel your feelings, like Dr. Rush was saying, and then also you're in a community, so you don't have to do this on your own. You may not know what support you need, but saying something to someone, when in doubt, reach out, is going to be significantly better way for you to get some support that you need as an individual. And then as far as the community, the two things I think about is the user experience and grace. So each of you have an experience whenever you interact with a person or an organization on this campus. And when we think about what we want our resources to be able to do for the community, the only way that they're going to get better is if we understand what the user experience is like, right? So if we get a bunch of reviews that suggest that we need to expend our hours for a particular resource so that it can be as useful as possible to the community, getting that feedback constructively is going to help us make that change. And so thinking about whenever we access these resources, our genuine interaction and what that experience is like to better inform how our resources can support the community. And then the other part of that is grace. That user experience process takes a very long time to make change sometimes. And so being consistent in the feedback and then giving our organizations and the professionals behind those organizations or those resources a little bit of grace in trying to make that change and trying to figure out how to provide the resources in an appropriate manner for the entire community.
Thank you. Kaylee?
I agree. I think that I want to say this quickly and also just kind of flatly. Like, I know that staff and faculty on this campus have a responsibility to support student success. That is why we are here. We are here to promote you all to succeed. But if staff and faculty are also unwell, that creates a really, really difficult disconnect between supporting students that might also be unwell. So I think one of my biggest things that I would like to promote or to talk about is like creating more spaces for staff and faculty to have their sense of community, to have their sense of care, and to reach out for support as needed on that level so that we can give our best and our most to our students that are in need.
Oh, Victoria?
Yeah, when we talk about what changes we want to see in the community, one thing I'm really interested in is cultural change, because a lot of problems can be changed through institutional thinking and institutional planning and that kind of reform, but some problems are cultural problems. And I love CC students, but it's true that we need to do a better job of taking care of each other, holding each other accountable, utilizing our resources while pushing for resource improvement, appreciating CC and everything it does for us while thinking critically about its shortcomings and exclusiveness. CC isn't perfect, but we can't feel belonging without feeling gratitude and love for this place and for each other. And we can't build an inclusive campus without having genuine and practiced respect for all people working at the college as well. Cultural change happens over time, and it starts with upperclassmen setting a good example. It starts in orientation and Bridge Scholars program, and taking care of each other and building good rapport and trust between students, staff, faculty, and administration. You know, in my work, I advocate for students and I work towards change and I communicate with people, but cultural change needs to be something that happens long-term and collectively, and that's something that I'm really passionate about. So I did pre-write that response out just so I could mention all the things that I wanted to mention. But yeah, I think we are definitely headed in a good direction.
Thanks, Rory.
And I'm going to use the term resiliency, which we've talked about a lot, but when I took over my position, I always talk about the durable student athlete. What I mean by durable is like someone who's physically fit, can withstand both mental and physical challenges. We talk about improving our athletic performance, which is success both on and off our fields and courts and where we play. And so I think just building up, we've talked about it in this panel, just our resiliency to mental health stressors. And so I'd like to see, right, I think very quickly, all of us can be out of homeostasis and into crisis. And so, right, there has to be levels between, right, being uncomfortable and being in true crisis. And so to me, I think it's building our resiliency and our durability to mental health stressors, because they're always going to be there regardless of who you are. And so, yeah, I think just increasing CC campus's durability or resiliency.
Thank you. Adriana?
Yeah, for us in campus safety, it's extending the kindness, having that customer service lens, whether, at the end of the day, we're all human, but that kindness extended, a genuine conversation, a greeting, a hug, a high five, a bump, whatever you're comfortable with. And then our role and our job is that extra added value that we bring to that conversation, and the experiences that we have, the interactions that we have informally with students, staff, and faculty during a safe ride or a transport, or unlocking someone's office, or letting them into a building. We're all human, and so we can make mistakes together and learn from them, but truly it's just that kindness and making sure that we're here to help. We're here to get through whatever the current struggle, the struggle in the next 5 hours, 10 days, 1 month, 3 years. So that's basically what we would extend to you all.
Thank you. Are there questions from the audience at this point in time?
I have one question. I'm not sure who this is necessarily best addressed to, but I wanted to ask about thinking maybe less on the individual side and more on larger school policy changes, and referencing like the letter of demands that President Richardson had mentioned at the beginning. But I wanted to ask how things like school-wide mental health days implemented by every professor, or higher student wages, or things that are more geared towards the collective, how do, and again, I'm not sure who this is best for, but how do you see those fitting into this initiative? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, for sure, I want to direct people to the website that Ryan referenced earlier, and I'm not sure whether there are folks on this panel that can speak directly to your question, but that website is taking each of those demands, is my understanding, and providing information about how the college is responding to those. So that would definitely be one place. And is there anything else that y'all would like me to shout out to? Okay.
Yeah, I can just address that a tiny bit. Obviously, there's a lot of parts of those demands that I can't get out to all of them, but the faculty have kind of made a pledge that's adaptable to each department. And personally, I know that my syllabus this block included that pledge, and he basically talked about how he plans to implement that into the curriculum and into the class for the block. And so hopefully other people saw similar things this block, kind of moving into that reform stage. Also, there's going to be, right now there's a hiring process for an associate VP of wellness, which we haven't had before. And that's an email that got sent out, but who reads their emails, right? And yeah, there's just a lot of little things happening here and there. I don't think that there's going to be a campus pause day, just because that's failed in the past, and that might not be the best solution. But late starts like this, or people being able to take off days in their individual blocks, or having pause days for individual blocks of okay, third Thursday, we're all not going to come to school. I encourage you. But then I'm also in Project 2024, which is thinking a lot more long term. And one thing that we're talking about there is like, maybe we have class 4 days a week. Maybe we have 1 day a week where we can't have meetings. Maybe we implement those pauses in different ways. So that's not something that's guaranteed at all, but mental health and like those demands and that reform is like super taken into account when we're talking about long-term change and institutional planning with Project 2024. That's one thing I wanted to plug really quick.
And then I want to be mindful of time, that there may be folks who need to head out. It's now 9:45, and I know classes begin at 10, so folks might need to go. So I definitely want for us to have a chance, and I think that potentially folks on the panel, maybe not Ray, who might need to get to class, but might be able to
go
stay.
anywhere.
Okay, might be able to stay for additional questions, but if we could give, before folks do have to head out, a really big thank you to our panelists today. And there is food, grab and go, food outside, so you can grab something on your way. And if people on Zoom want to come by the Armstrong lobby outside of Mormon Theater to get some, there'll be more left after this. So we'll go ahead and jump, Alice, to your question.
I'm gonna let you go first, but question, if folks who are on Zoom are able to submit questions, whoever is in charge of the Zoom. Thank you.
I got a head shake to that. Would there be ways for folks to submit questions? Oh, I'll let Ryan.
Maybe you can ask your question while he's setting up.
I'll answer that real quick. So we didn't have a process set up before, but if you want to go ahead and text me a question, it's 720-281-6844. If you're on Zoom, thank you for being inclusive to our Zoom partners. I appreciate it.
Could you say that number again a little bit more slowly?
720-281-6844.
Thank you guys all for your time and for being here. I have kind of been thinking about like the role that mental health advocacy for students affects professors, and I think like often these really amazing changes that we want to make put more stress or burden on professors. Like I think of, you know, asking them to shift syllabi or like do extra trainings. And I was wondering if you guys had any thoughts or ideas on like how we can better support or like compensate our faculty while we like ask them to support us, the students.
There's no faculty members on this panel, so if somebody wanted to just grab a mic, or Dean Chan.
Yeah. And while Dr. Chan is coming up, I would say I would go back to those things that Dore and Andriana were talking about earlier in terms of the kindness and the show of actual appreciation and saying hello and sharing that kind of kindness on an individual basis as we go through our days would be really important.
Thank you. So faculty actually engage in regular training. So in some sense, it is about, like for all of us, right? Prioritization. Instead of thinking about it as adding on additional training, if this is important, and it is important, then there are some trainings and some professional development opportunity that may be deprioritized a little bit so that we create space for folks to do this. And as Ryan mentioned earlier, the QPR training and other mental health first aid training, we do intend to have a broader time scale for people to take it, as well as provide it asynchronously, so that makes it easier for people to fit it in. But if you think about it, it's kind of like when we also, right, invest in anti-racism, inclusive classrooms. All of these things are about that, these few years we really want to double down on thinking about how we do it well. And so I think we are going to integrate it into part of our work. And then you talked about that indeed, right, that if a lot of people come last minute, can I change this? Can I change that? Can I have an extra office hour because I missed this class? It does add a lot, right? One faculty member with 20 students in class, and as our panelists talk about, trauma and distress is actually very common. So easily, I'm thinking about when I was in the classroom, I might say that a quarter of the students have some important life events that happen. If I had 24 students at block, 6 students need something special. And of course, we always try to do something that can work. But I think, as students, if you sometimes understand that if your faculty say that, "Ooh, I'd like to help you. How about this way? Can you also do some that is leveraging other resources on campus instead of always only needing the professor to be the only partner in solving those distressing situation needs?" Then we can have a partnership. But I really appreciate you pointing out that we're kind of in it together, that we are supporting each other. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alice. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm in campus activities. I am curious. I recognize that we are a small campus community. We are a small staff and faculty community, and a lot of the crisis intervention and the folks who are responding, it's a very small group of people. And shout out to the people who have been responding. My question is, if CC as a community or as administration have been critically looking at the amount of people who are responding and their well-being. It would be great if we could have a huge group of RLCs, a huge group of, campus safety and multiple Derrells. I recognize that that's probably not possible for us at that time. And so my question is more, are we changing policies or looking at policies and procedures in order to expand the group of people who are responding in that moment?
It is my understanding that yes, indeed, the college is looking sort of at all of the components of these kinds of processes, from the written policies that we have or that we are developing, to the folks who would be, stepping forward on a given day in a given moment, and definitely are looking at those things. That there will be likely, some structural changes in terms of programs and resources and things like that will come out of the external review process that the college is engaged in. And then that position that Dore mentioned would be making decisions about those things, for sure.
To caveat, a residential experience, campus safety, and myself are looking at ways where we can leverage each other in support of students, especially over all the breaks. The block plan creates a unique challenge with student support when we consider block breaks, fall break, winter break, summer break, a block off, spring break, and these opportunities where students can be on campus, but not necessarily have those normal check-ins with the professor or with a lot of other students. And as we develop this particular touch point where we can be very intentional about not only us making sure that students are supported, but also making sure that the staff that are trying to support those students have time to pull away from the stress that can come with receiving a report that we haven't seen someone in 3 or 4 days, or if we get a report from a family member about a student that they haven't heard from in a week, and then we find out that that student is taking a block off, but that they live on campus, and then how those feelings may start to develop in whoever is responding to that. There is some steps that we're trying to take to figure out what that touch point looks like, and how we can ensure that we bring our best to supporting students, but then also that we have the appropriate individuals there to support the students throughout all the times that they're on campus.
And with that, I definitely want to be mindful of our time. Thank you again to our panelists. Look forward to engaging with all of you in the coming days, weeks, and months, and the exciting things that are happening on campus. I think probably some of us would be able to hang around for a little bit if you would like to speak to a person directly. And thank you all so much for your engagement today and for being here both in person and via Zoom. Thanks so much. Thanks again.